At exactly 1:34 p.m. on June 12, 2025, a security camera quietly captured the instant when Air India Flight 171, a Boeing 787, lifted its nose off the runway. Yet only 30 seconds later, the left engine spat out a thick gray plume like ash. 4 seconds after that, the aircraft vanished into a low patch of cloud and never returned to the radar screen. In the control room, every voice caught in the throat as the video frame locked. A deep impact rumbled in the distance. Veteran engineers, seasoned captains, clear skies, every pre-takeoff parameter squarely within the safety margin. If this were merely a routine failure, why did the catastrophe unfold? On the afternoon of the 12th of June, the pale yellow lights along the 3,505-meter runway at Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Airport had barely reflected off the white paint of the Boeing 787 when AI-171 roared forward and shot into the darkness. The weather was perfectly calm, not a single cloud or hint of Gujarat's summer haze, making that takeoff moment look as ordinary as any of 100 night departures. No one could have guessed that only 30 seconds later the most terrifying disaster imaginable would unfold. On board, the initial manifest listed 230 passengers and 12 crew members, meaning 242 people on the same journey toward London Gatwick. Though the final number is still disputed, the authorities have now confirmed 231 victims through DNA testing. What is certain is that only one person survived, seated in 11A, and the entire cabin fell into eternal silence right after the last faint Mayday. At the controls sat Captain Sumit Sabharwal, a veteran Dreamliner commander with more than 15,000 flight hours, nearly 8,600 of them on the 787. Beside him, First Officer Clive Kunder, 3,400 hours, occupied the pilot flying seat. For Air India, just emerging from a staffing crisis after restructuring, this pair was considered absolutely safe. That is why the whisper captured in the cockpit, "Why did you shut off the fuel?" sent an even colder chill through investigators, for both pilots denied making that move in the very same tragic instant. What stunned the experts most, however, is the probability that both GNX engines would shut down simultaneously without birds, volcanic ash, or a bomb. Vanishingly rare, about 1 in 140 billion flight hours, equivalent to being struck by lightning twice in exactly the same spot. That figure, buried deep in risk tables few in the industry ever bothered to read, suddenly vaulted onto the front page because of AI-171. Or is there another hidden link lurking behind the tragedy? That question still hangs in the air. Between ambulance sirens and the gray smoke trail spreading across India's sky. In the aviation world, the Boeing 737 MAX is the newest and most powerful member of the 737 family, boasting redesigned wings and fuel-saving LEAP 1B engines. Redesigned means Boeing lengthened the span and fitted split scimitar winglets at the tips to cut drag, letting the jet sip less fuel and fly farther. That is why when security footage showed the aircraft leaping skyward and then immediately dipping its nose only seconds after liftoff, the online community swarmed with questions. Had this state-of-the-art airliner taken off in the wrong configuration? The first theory offered was that the crew had forgotten to deploy the flaps. These are small auxiliary surfaces along the rear edge of the main wing, seemingly simple yet decisive for lift at low speed. Picture the 737 as a surfer. If the board is not tilted at the right angle, the lifting wave slips away and the 60-ton jet can only waddle down the runway. Normally, takeoff flap settings range from 5 to 15 degrees. The shorter the runway, the larger, roughly 15 degrees, while steeper climbouts over terrain call for smaller angles and a longer roll. Ahmedabad's single runway, at 3,505 meters, is long enough for almost any takeoff configuration. The drama deepened when zoomed frames appeared to show the flap line barely moving, apparently bare. In reality, the 737's takeoff configuration warning is programmed to shriek if the pilots forget flaps, trim, or leading-edge devices. The system works through a matrix of limit switches and stays silent only when every parameter sits inside safe margins. A Skybrary study calls the warning a gatekeeper that has sharply reduced configuration error accidents since the mid-1980s. In the 737 MAX cockpit, that horn is wired straight into the cockpit voice recorder. If it sounds, the tape captures it. When investigators decoded the CVR, they heard no such alarm. They also found no sign of the crew hurriedly flipping the flap emergency checklist, a sequence of switch clicks an experienced examiner can identify by sound alone. Next, the wreckage recovery team reassembled the right wing section. Both main flaps were jammed deep in the mud, yet still resting at 10 degrees. The exact takeoff angle recommended for Gujarat's long runway and dry heat. That measurement was confirmed in the preliminary report released on the 12th of July by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, which noted that the flap angle at impact matched the standard configuration. In fact, viewers not seeing the flaps drop is easy to explain. A 10-degree angle is razor-thin. From several hundred meters away, the flap sits hidden under the halogen runway lights. It is the same optical illusion that has sparked confusion in other cases. In 2015, online observers likewise suspected a Trans-Asia ATR 72 of taking off flapless, only for the final report to show the flaps perfectly normal while the crash stemmed from the captain shutting down the healthy engine by mistake. So why couldn't Flight 171's 737 MAX climb, even with one engine weakened? Under the one engine out theory, the aircraft still has ample performance provided the flaps are set correctly and the captain follows procedure. Maintain speed, retract the gear, identify the failed engine, then pull the thrust lever to idle. The flight data recorder, however, unveiled a chilling mystery. Just 3 seconds after wheels off, both fuel levers on the center pedestal snapped to cutoff simultaneously. The two engines died, the 737 became a glider, and in less than half a minute it thundered into the roof of a dormitory. That was the moment silent wings turned brutally real, no longer a blur in a grainy clip. That seemingly small detail swept the flap theory off the board, yet raised a new question. What made two fuel switches, set just one arm's length apart, flip almost together? Did a pilot cut the wrong lever in panic? Or did an electrical glitch make them disengage on their own? Both possibilities drag the investigation into murkier territory, involving human behavior and software faults, the very specters that have haunted the 737 MAX before. For now, flaps not deployed sits on the discard pile. It was a smokescreen drawing viewers' eyes to the wing edge instead of the control heart. Yet removing it makes the crash even more gripping. If the flaps worked perfectly, the jet should have climbed smoothly on a single engine, just as every MAX crew practices in the simulator. Yet over Ahmedabad, the calm night sky still rejected Flight 171's wings. Aviation science often speaks of the domino effect. A tiny initial error topples a chain of mistakes. But when the first domino, the flaps, remains upright, the chain slips into mystery. In the analysis room, investigators replay the third second of the recording once more, straining to separate the click of a fuel switch from the vibration of the fuselage skin. Meanwhile, the manufacturer rushes engineers to India to inspect a sliver of printed circuit board from the turbine controller. Could a rogue voltage spike make the switch jump? Or did someone in the cockpit, under bone-crushing stress, place a trembling hand on the lever of fate? That lone cockpit door stays sealed beneath tons of twisted metal, and the black boxes tap out their last bits of data. With the flap domino still standing, viewers will look next to the second, engine failure, and the third, human action. For now, Silent Wings has whispered only that the secret is not on the wing's trailing edge but hidden deeper, where shaking fingers hover amid red blinking lights in a cramped flight deck. At dawn, 13 seconds after the wheels left the runway, a security camera under the fuselage recorded a scene that made many specialists shiver. The ram air turbine, a small propeller that supplies emergency power, suddenly deployed like a folded anchor reserved for the moment both engines lose thrust at the same time. That instant immediately fueled rumors of dirty fuel, because the rat only pops out when the aircraft is almost completely without electricity, a scenario so rare it appears only once every few decades. In the first hours after the crash, the hashtag #dirtyfuel flooded Indian social media. People shared footage of refueling at Ahmedabad and insisted that metal shavings in the tanker had caused the two GenX engines to quit. The conspiracy spread further when airport pipeline schematics showed that Air India's entire 787 fleet usually used the same Bowser before night flights to Europe. Yet a technical bulletin released on the afternoon of 15 June stated plainly that 5 other jets using that exact Jet A1 batch had landed safely in Frankfurt, Paris, Delhi, Doha, and Muscat, with no abnormal fuel pressure warnings. Immediately after sealing the site, the AAIB investigation team drilled 4 sample tubes, each 100 milliliters, from the Bowser tank, the underground reserve, and the delivery nozzle. 36 hours later, the DGCA laboratory published chromatograph results. No metal particles, water content under 15 parts per million, FSI within limits, meaning the fuel was textbook clean. The summary, with annotations, stressed that every figure meets NATO Def Stan 9191. It must also be noted that if large-scale contamination had existed, the 787's temperature and pressure sensors in the fuel line would flash red as soon as the start pumps engaged. Flight 171's black box recorded no such alert. Looking back, British Airways 38 in 2008 and United 1733 in 2019 both involved fuel mixed with ice or paraffin wax at cruise altitude, not immediately after takeoff. In each case, the engines acted up hours into the flight, totally unlike the power loss within 30 seconds on AI-171. So why did the 2 engine-mounted generators fall silent together? The remaining theory turns toward the cockpit. Either a control circuit fault or a human hand severed the jet A1 flow from the wing tank to the combustion chamber. A 15-page preliminary report released on 11 July poured more fuel on the fire when it quoted the cockpit voice recorder. "Why did you cut the fuel?" "I didn't." That brief exchange instantly shifted the probe from ghost fuel to a harsher question. Might someone, by accident or on purpose, have flipped both cutoff switches at once, an action that requires lifting a mechanical guard before moving to the stop position? In short, the lab samples are clean. 5 sister flights on the same batch landed smoothly, and neither the manufacturer nor global safety agencies have issued any fuel quality alerts. Ghost fuel likely exists only in the collective imagination, yet the very act of ruling it out digs the mystery deeper. If not contaminants in Jet A1, what could cut power to both engines in the blink of an eye? When one tiny rat must shoulder an entire Dreamliner, the enigma behind the disaster grows clearer and still has no name. 14 hours after the crash, 2 chilling numbers lit up the analysis room monitor at India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau: 375,000 and 140 billion. They are not ciphers but risk figures tallied by the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration. A modern jet engine, on average, fails only once every 375,000 flight hours, roughly 4 decades of non-stop running. If 2 engines quit for unrelated reasons within the same minute, the figure soars to 1 in 140 billion hours. One occurrence every 16 million years, as Founding Fuel magazine quipped last week. Such vast numbers make the AI-171 crash feel like a hole punched through the wall of physics. Less than half a minute after takeoff, both generators bolted to the twin GenX engines suddenly died, forcing the emergency rat turbine to deploy and keep the flight controls alive. In that instant, the jet fell away from the runway lights as if someone flicked a switch. Utterly contrary to the decade-long reliability record of the 787 line. To grasp why the dual independent failure scenario is branded impossible, we must revisit U.S. Airways 1549, the 2009 Miracle on the Hudson. When a flock of Canada geese struck, both CFM56 fans swallowed feathers and blood, shattered blades, and flamed out in just 78 seconds. The NTSB's 213-page report logged 8 bone and feather fragments recovered inside the compressors, confirming a common cause: bird impact. In other words, without a shared point of failure, birds, ash, or a bomb, probability theory erases the notion that 2 engines simply fold at once. Therefore, when inspectors bent over each GENX fan on VTANB and found not a feather, smear of blood, or telltale dent, the already hushed air grew stiller. A preliminary note quoted by the Economic Times stated no evidence of bird strike or sabotage. That same day, ABC News relayed an AAIB source. No significant bird activity recorded on the departure corridor the morning of 12th June. One cul-de-sac closed, yet a wider doorway opened. If not nature, what locked the throttles only seconds after the wheels left Earth? Safety engineers often trace faults with an event tree model. The first branch charts independent failures. Each sub-branch a bearing seizure, fan blade fracture, turbine shaft snap. Multiply those tiny probabilities and the joint chance is virtually nil in the same moment. The second branch groups common cause failures, dirty fuel, bird strike, freak weather, central command mistrim. When both branches are ruled out, the model leaves one bare variable: human agency, where 2 pilots' decisions or a stray circuit signal can simultaneously starve both engines of fuel. Just 3 days ago, the Air Current, citing internal sources, revealed black box analysis showing that both fuel control switches were nearly synchronized downward. Likewise, a summary in Hindustan Times this morning confirms that datum, though analysts caution against hasty conclusions. Hence, the common point is no longer birds or debris, but a cockpit 8 square meters wide. A pounding heart, climb-out pressure, stall shaker chatter, or a spoofed software queue could become the invisible link yanking 2 healthy power plants dark, as if someone yanked the plug from the wall. Probabilists call this a rare but conditioned event, like tossing 2 perfectly fair coins. The chance of double heads is 1/4, yet if the tosser secretly pins the first coin, the rarity vanishes. Flight 171 suggests a similar pattern. Once a human hand, literal or via digital controls, bridges the gap, the 1 in 140 billion statistic plunges to a level possible in real life. It is no accident that the NTSB once warned, 95% of modern air accidents involve human error at some stage. The greatest foe of billion-dollar airframes may not be storm clouds, nor a far-off 1 in 100 billion odds table, but the split-second lapse where a pilot misjudges a sound, a vibration, or a flashing light on the panel. When investigators tick off independent mechanical failure and strike bird impact, The box that remains, Human Link, glows like runway lights in the Gujarat night. That cockpit now lies crushed beneath twisted steel, yet the data recorder still drips out bytes, exposing every yoke shutter and each tap on a warning light. The 1 in 140 billion figure stunned the audience, but what chills them more is the idea that turning the near impossible into reality required only one delicate convergence: a pilot's pulse, an amber glint on the ECAS, and a line of code buried in a microchip. The vast statistics had declared it impossible. Humanity, with all its limits and blind spots, made the impossible real in under 30 seconds. And that is the most unsettling mystery still hanging over the Ahmedabad night sky. 2 days after the accident, India's Directorate General of Civil Aviation stripped 3 Air India scheduling chiefs of their authority, men who had directly drafted pilots' rosters. The order cited repeated violations of duty time and rest time limits, a warning that summer schedule pressure may have pushed Flight 171's crew beyond the safety threshold. From that moment, the cockpit picture turned gray. Fatigue, decision fog, and, at last, the fatal pull of a lever. As the suspension became public, Air India launched a series of emergency simulator runs at its New Delhi training center. Dozens of Dreamliner pilots faced the scenario. Left engine loses thrust suddenly, while the pilot mistakenly shuts down the right engine. Results leaked to Business Standard showed that more than 20% of runs ended in total loss of control. Enough for investigators to label this mix-up a serious candidate for the direct cause. Misidentifying the failed engine is hardly new. In 2015, Trans-Asia Flight GE-235 plunged into the Keelung River after the captain cut the healthy engine, killing 43. Taiwan's Aviation Safety Council report concluded the crew lacked cross-confirmation during the emergency. Further back, the 1989 Kegworth disaster, British Midland 92, also began when the crew shut down the wrong engine, sending a 737-400 into the M1 embankment and killing 47. These 2 tragedies are staples of CRM classes. Yet the warning seems not to have echoed loudly enough in Ahmedabad's night shift. Airport security footage offered the first clue. A gray ribbon of smoke streamed from the left exhaust exactly 2 seconds after liftoff. Then the left wing clearly dipped before the jet slipped into darkness. CNN analyst Miles O'Brien, studying the frames in slow motion, leaned toward an engine under power from the start. If so, the captain had barely 10 seconds to make a life-or-death call in a violently shaking cockpit. Standard procedure for single engine loss is explicit. Keep the axis straight, climb to at least 1,000 feet, stabilize speed, then confirm the dead side before retarding that fuel lever to idle. However, a preliminary report quoted by the Financial Times says both fuel cutoff switches dropped to off, only 12 seconds after the stall shake alert, silencing both Gen X engines at once. This fits black box data obtained by the air current. The cockpit transcript records one panicked question: "Why did you shut off the fuel?" Just before everything drowned in the electrical failure alarm. Piece together the fragments: schedule pressure, the simulator tests, the left engine smoke, the twin fuel cut knock, and a human error under peak stress looms large. Yet the exact nature of that slip remains behind the cockpit's crushed shell. A panic misgrab, a misleading warning, or software that yanked both switches by itself. So far, investigators have cleared 3 familiar tiles: correct flaps, clean fuel, and no bird marks. The lone tile still glowing is human error in a moment of crushing pressure. Though the file is unfinished, Air India has advanced 1 crore rupees, about 120,000 USD, to each family and set up a long-term support fund. Yet lawyers for many relatives call the amount inadequate and have filed class action suits in Mumbai and New York, branding the airline's stance unacceptable. While legal fires burn, Flight 171's 2 black boxes lie in AAIB Delhi's lab. The preliminary readout has revealed only the instant both fuel switches flipped from run to cutoff, then vanished from the data for 32 fateful seconds. Every remaining bit could deliver an answer, or open another maze. What, in your view, truly hurled the Dreamliner from Gujarat's sky? Leave your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to mindgap so you won't miss the next chapter when the full data finally comes to light.